Hello, welcome to the Success Sanctuary. My name is Eliza Spots. I am so grateful to have you here and so excited to have you here to go over this topic. You already know what it is, so we're gonna jump straight into it and let's get started. In this video, we're gonna talk about why boundaries are absolutely necessary for your success. We're gonna get into what boundaries are, why you need them, and how to establish and maintain them, okay? So go ahead and sit back and enjoy, and let's get empowered. So what exactly is a boundary, you may ask? Well, the definition that I found on Google, a line that marks the limits of an area and or a dividing line, and another noun for it would be a limit of a subject or a sphere of activity. So just kind of like how you see this fence in the background here, boundaries are exactly like fences, right? Where, boundaries are what shapes our lives. So this fence, shapes the backyard, and anyone who would be crossing this fence or this line would be technically trespassing, and it's not really a legal thing to do. So if you compare it to our lives, boundaries is what shapes our lives. So what we say yes to and what we say no to is what tells us what enters into our lives and what stays in our lives, etc., etc. So why is it so important that we set boundaries and maintain boundaries for success? Well, I'll tell you why. Boundaries are a way of self-care. Now, when we think about self-care, sometimes we may think, okay, well, that's kind of selfish, just because of the words and the connotation that our society has created around self. It's very, all over the place. So we're trying to find that healthy balance here. So when we set and maintain boundaries, it is declaring to the world, to people, to things, to events, to energies, what we will and won't accept. So let's say, for example, we have a lack of healthy boundaries. And because of that, well, I'll share a personal story. I very much used to be a people pleaser growing up because I never was taught boundaries. I never really experienced boundaries. And so because of that, I didn't know how to set and maintain my own. And because of that, and because of my desire to be loved and to be accepted and to be loved and to be accepted, I thought I had to go out of my way to be that, to be loved and accepted. And so I had this limiting belief inside of, and that's a whole nother thing of beliefs, and we'll get to that as well eventually, but I had this limiting belief inside that in order for me to be liked and to be loved, that I had to unconditionally love them in such a way that I would let them step all over me, and I would let them use me and abuse me, and I didn't even realize what was going on because that's just how I knew love. I didn't know boundaries. And what happened because of that is I ended up becoming very, very drained mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially, circumstantially, because when you don't have boundaries and when you don't have lines of limitations, essentially what you're saying is, it's free open land. Anyone come, anyone take. And when you don't have boundaries, oftentimes you will attract people who will come and just take from you. They will take whatever you allow them to take. And so that's why it's so important for us to establish these boundaries so that we can protect ourselves, because when we protect ourselves, we take care of ourselves better. And when we take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, materialistically, whatever, so on and so forth, the better that we feel and the better that we are inside, the better that we can treat those around us. So it creates this ripple effect of, okay, so we feel good and whole and fulfilled because we're feeling good and whole and fulfilled while we go and interact with all these other people within our circle, because we're interacting with them on a healthy, whole, balanced, and healed plane and with good boundaries. These people are going to have really good interactions with us, and because these people have really good interactions with us, they're going to be able to go, and it just becomes quantified. Everything is narcissist, and that it only enables a narcissist to continue doing what they're doing. So if we continue to allow these people who will just take advantage, they will only continue to do the same thing, not only to you, but to the next person who doesn't have their own set of healthy boundaries. So the more that we can set healthy boundaries, the more we will raise our standards of living and being, and I think as a whole, as a collective, we will just heal ourselves emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, financially. We can grow and expand to, I'm sure, levels that we can't even comprehend yet. So that's why boundaries are so important, is because ultimately it creates a big ripple effect. It's not just for you, it's for you, it's for your self-care, but it's also bigger than you, which is also not bigger than you at the same time, because you have this ripple effect. So you are just as big as this thing, but it starts with us to make and establish and maintain these boundaries and these standards for ourselves, but also for everyone else and for the betterment of people. So when you set boundaries, you essentially, categorize yes what is allowed and no what's not allowed. And so what happens is, when you establish these boundaries, it eases the burden of decision making. So if someone comes to you in a moment, if you don't have established boundaries, you can kind of be in the in-between, and it just kind of like puts a pressure on you because you haven't established any boundaries. And so you're already feeling pressure, and then if you don't know exactly what to choose, you could choose the wrong thing, which could cause even more stress and even more pressure, rather than if you were to have taken the time beforehand to establish and maintain and get clear on those boundaries and assert them. Essentially, it protects you from stress. And stress is the number one leading cause of death, ultimately, because when we stress, it lowers our immune system, and we're more likely to either, get contaminated or form some sort of dis-ease within our body because of the stress levels, because of our immune system that it lowers. And now because of this, again, it just goes more into self-care. So when you create these boundaries and establish them, you're easing the burdens, you're easing the stress. And success really is all about how you maintain stress. That's really what success is. How do you maintain stress? And that's going to be a whole nother video. We'll talk about that as well. Also, as to why boundaries are so important, when you become very clear in your purpose and your boundaries and what your life looks like, again, it eases that burden of decision making in the moment. And how that translates is then you become more purposeful, you become more intentional. And so when you become more purposeful and you become more intentional, it speeds up that process towards success. So it becomes a whole lot easier to be like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I want that, don't want that, want that, don't want that. And when you can pick the things that are good for you and, keep out the things that aren't good for you, then, you're only going to build more towards self-development, self-fulfillment, and success. The next part is, how do we, number one, establish and or create these boundaries, and number two, maintain them. So let's go ahead and get into number one. How do we establish boundaries? Well, first of all, you're going to want to clarify your ideal way of being, living, and interacting with people on a daily basis. What will you accept? What will you not accept? How do you want to be treated? What do you want to receive? What are the things that bring you joy? What makes you feel good inside? How will you know what, and how will you know what is for you and what is not? Well, I'll tell you, we all have an internal guidance system. And it's really about listening to that internal guidance system. Your body and your soul knows, and it can feel when something doesn't feel good, when something isn't good for you. So it's about really tuning in and listening to yourself and trusting that self inside that is asking you, please, this is not good for me. This is hurting me. Please listen. So also being able to tune in, and again, clarifying. When you tune in, you can clarify, then that's when you'll be able to establish those boundaries. So when you clarify your ideal way of being, living, receiving, interacting, etc., etc., then it becomes very clear for you to identify what does serve you and what doesn't serve you. Now, this is also going to be a work in process too, because we're all on a journey. It's not so hot and cold. It's a lot about balancing. It's a lot about trial and error. It's a lot about saying, okay, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. But it's mostly about listening to your inner guidance and what it's telling you. Here are some areas to maybe consider when you're thinking about boundaries you want to establish and maintain. Number one is going to be your mental. So what is your way of thinking? What are your beliefs? What is your way of, interacting on a mental level? How are you being with yourself? How are you being with people? And what do you want to receive from people? What are you willing to receive from people? Do you want drama or do you want respect? So what is drama to you? What is respect to you? And that's something you got to figure out for yourself. Number two is your emotional. Now, this is an important one to keep in mind, because what happens when you set up boundaries, and this is just kind of like a little side note, is when you set up boundaries, it can cause triggering when you begin to interact with people. Sometimes when you set up a boundary, it can make someone upset or angry or disappointed because of this thing that you chose to do. But you got to remember that you are protecting yourself. And that's the best thing that you can do, not only for yourself, but for everyone else around you. Because when you protect yourself, you're showing an example of how others can protect themselves. So spread the message, live the message. Just keep in mind that when you do, consider emotional boundaries, also make sure to not ever take anything too personally, because ultimately it's not about you at the end of the day. If someone reacts or responds to you in a certain way, it is only merely a reflection of how they are internally feeling inside about about feeling inside. And that's okay. You're here to protect you and your being. We are here to help others protect their being, but the best way for us to all protect ourselves and protect each other is to live empowered and to empower others to live empowered. Number three is going to be your physical. The physical is really how we establish relationships. And so, we're all different at the end of the day. What we physically will and will not allow, the speed at which we go at with our physical closeness and intimacy. And so ultimately, just remember again, we're all different. We all have different speeds. We all have different timing. We all have different things that we are or aren't physically comfortable with. And so make sure to establish yours and voice them. Have courage in voicing your physical comfort levels. You are here to protect yourself. Live empowered, protect yourself. You have full permission to do that. Number four is going to be your material and financial boundaries. Now, oh my goodness gracious, y'all, this was one of my biggest issues. This and another one. A lot of my life, I have always really just wanted to help people. I've always been a people person. I've loved people. I've always been very incredibly empathetic. I've always felt people very deeply. I've felt many very deep emotions. I've, gone through a whole nother story. But one of my ways of interacting with people and showing them my love and care was sharing my material and financial wealth and gain and things with them. Now, I've unintentionally become a sugar mama many times because I didn't have healthy set boundaries that I built and maintained for myself in relationships. So what I did is I attracted people who would come into my life and they would stick around and use my resources, and I would allow them to do so. And they wouldn't take care of themselves financially. And it just wore on me. It just wasn't healthy. It was terrible. And in this economy, I'm a woman, and so it became extremely hard for me to help people who didn't even really want to financially help themselves. So again, because of my lack of boundaries, I attracted individuals who weren't financially and materialistically empowered to go and help themselves. So please learn from my lessons. They were very painful. I went through them a couple times. It took me a couple rounds for me to figure it out. So please learn from my mistakes and don't make the same thing. And I'm saying this for all the boundaries, not just material and financial, but that was one of my hardest struggles, was my lack of boundaries for the material and financial realm, and actually all around in general. And then last but not least, and again, none of these are in any particular order, these are just things for you to consider: your time and your energy. Where are you putting your focus? Where you're putting your focus is usually where you're trying to help things grow and expand and build and etc., etc. So you gotta ask yourself, okay, am I putting time and focus into things that are giving me a positive return on time and energy, or is it merely just taking my energy and depleting me of my time and my energy? So you will know ultimately. Again, ultimately you've got to listen to your inner guidance, your inner compass, your inner voice, your higher being, God, whatever, however you want to describe it, your intuition. It speaks to you. Trust it. Please trust it, because I did not for so long. And because of it, and because of my lack of boundaries, I really became depleted. And because of my lack of boundaries, I attracted people who used me and abused me and then left me out to dry, And so I went through that lesson a couple of times, and they're not fun lessons. They are not. They hurt. But I'm grateful for them because I've now learned and grown from them, and now it's something that I can teach. And hopefully you don't have to go through it through the stubborn way, like the way I did, but hopefully you can take this wisdom and this knowledge and apply it in the best way that works for you, in yourself, and your being, in your life, and for your self-development and your self-fulfillment and your success. Ultimately, it's up to you at the end of the day. You get to determine it. I just highly invite you to apply and protect yourself. Because when you protect yourself, you empower yourself, which helps empower others. Now, number 2, how do we maintain? Again, just kind of like that note, just remember that ultimately nothing is ever personal. If someone responds to you in an emotional way because of your boundaries, it's not a reflection of who you are. I mean, it could be if you're being selfish. If you have a lack of boundaries and if you're trying to take people, extend and move beyond other people's boundaries, then yeah, that's not, that's on you, and that's something you need to reconsider, and that's something that you need to notice, as well as, okay, respecting other people's boundaries. Can I set and maintain my own, but can I also respect my own? Can I respect my own, and can I also respect others? You may find yourself that you will be triggering people who have certain expectations of your boundaries. And just keep in mind that at the end of the day, be courageous, stand for yourself, be your own advocate, empower yourself. Because when you do that, you help others do that. And it's going to create this beautiful ripple effect in your environment. And just watch, wait, and see the world transform. And remember that sometimes people are going to come test you to see if you will maintain your boundaries or if you're going to fold. And if you really want the best life for yourself, if you really do want success, make sure that you choose boundaries that are gonna help you be self-fulfilled and successful and never fold. Never fold. Never bend. Never break. Protect yourself. Now, granted, I'm not saying you have to be completely rigid in one way or another. Again, boundaries, it's gonna take some trial and error for you to find what is right for you. But just find what's right for you. And keep on learning, keep on living, keep on growing. Sometimes your boundaries are gonna evolve, they're gonna change, and that's okay. You don't have to stay one way. Do what works best for you. Do what will make and bring you the most joy and success and self-fulfillment. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And comment down below. I'm committed to my self-development, self-fulfillment, and success to go ahead and affirm and or strengthen that reality. Love y'all so much.